Good morning from Toronto, Canada, and good evening from Colombo, Sri Lanka. Tourism is a multifaceted and interconnected industry with the other sectors and industries of Sri Lankan economy. The industry has a strong backward and forward linkages, which is relatively higher than that in many other industries. It is also relatively a people-centric industry that invokes a lot of national pride and engine for grassroots wealth for its people. Pre-COVID-19, Sri Lankan tourism, I just want to say some numbers. The number of tourist arrivals were nearly 2 million, tourism income nearly 3.6 billion, number of rooms were I think between 39,000 to 40,000, average daily expenditure per tourist nearly $175, average duration of stay of tourists 11 days, direct contribution of tourism to the GDP approximately 5%, and tourism employment around nearly 440,000 jobs plus. Considering all these aspects, the impact of COVID-19 on Sri Lankan tourism must affect not only the income generation and employment of the tourism industry itself, but also its direct, indirect, induced impacts for the other industries as a whole of the economy of the country. However, the country somewhat has managed to stall the virus at its earliest inceptions. Talking to us about this and more, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome Kimarli Fernando, Chairperson, Sri Lanka Tourism. Welcome, Madam, to our show.
Thank you. Ayubowan to you all.
Thank you for taking out the time. So let's get started. The first case of the virus was confirmed in Sri Lanka on 27 January 2020. As of 16th April 2020, Sri Lanka being named as the 16th high-risk country prone to virus pandemic, to being ranked 9th best country in the world for its successful immediate response on tackling the virus. As of 2nd September 2020, a total of 3,092 confirmed cases and only 12 deaths have been reported in the country so far. Obviously, Sri Lanka has come a long way and it's a poster child of COVID-19 success. How did this happen and what's the outlook for tourism and hospitality moving forward?
Sure, thank you. Basically, you said that we've had 12 deaths. Unfortunately, we have had 13.
Okay.
Very early on, when the first case happened, that was a case of a Chinese lady, 44-year-old lady who got COVID, who since recovered and returned back to China. Today, we have only 186 COVID patients. What the government did very early on is that we took very strong, immediate action. So way back in January, February itself, the president set up a COVID task force. We even had one patient, a Sri Lankan patient. We started making quarantine centers, getting our PCR testing capacity up. For about 6 to 8 weeks, we had real, not sort of European style lockdown, but we had very serious curfew. So basically, food was delivered to homes. We arranged trucks to deliver food, fresh vegetables and rice and everything. The pharmacies were instructed for all the government, we have free medical care. So the prescriptions the medicine was delivered to the homes. So people, except a few of us who actually worked every single day and went out, 22 million people, 99.5 or more, remained at their homes. So this strong decision made has seen results for us because we never really had community transmission. But whatever infections we had, the last case was on the 30th of April. Wow. So what has happened is that, we don't have any patient in Sri Lanka who got COVID in Sri Lanka. What we do have, and the number you mentioned before, the 200 odd patients that we've had now, are all imported cases, meaning our Sri Lankans returning back from overseas. A lot have lost their jobs or for whatever reason, they want to return. So we are giving first priority. We have about 54,000 Sri Lankans wanting to return. So we are bringing them in a very staggered manner, because in Sri Lanka, we take every death seriously at the highest level. So when anybody passes away, we look at that, what happened, and we keep changing the protocols and what needs to be done. So now at the moment, anybody coming to Sri Lanka, airports were never closed for anyone to leave. Airports are closed for people to enter unless they're Sri Lankan or there is a diplomatic passport or something like that. So what happens is that if you are a Sri Lankan passport holder, you can return. There's a process to apply for that, and there's a long waiting list, obviously. And whenever they come, they do a PCR test before they arrive. We do a PCR test in the airport itself. And if somebody has got positive PCR, COVID, then immediately they are sent to hospital. We do not have, quarantine at home and this kind of thing.
Right.
Thankfully, the British medical system that we actually inherited many years ago has allowed us to handle a lot of these illnesses, including the diseases, including the polio, which we eradicated, as well as often we get dengue, which we have managed very well, is because we have we have 9 provinces in the country.
Right.
For the 22 million people. And we have within that the 25 total districts. So what happens is we have a government, they have the head office, as it were, in Colombo. But then we have in the 9 provinces medical care, as well as in the district, the 25. So we have about 3 layers of medical professions in, and most people can go to a hospital within so many kilometers. So that's really worked well. So what we did was we closed if you like, we had strict curfew. Nobody went to work, except if you were in emergency essential services, which was basically health and a few things. We simultaneously allowed the tea industry, the farmers, the exports to continue as essential services, but with limited staff. The government provided them funding every month so that they could buy their essential stuff. So when the WHO announced this as a global health pandemic on the 14th of March, basically we had about 80,000 tourists in Sri Lanka. Mm-hmm. So what Tourism Board did was immediately we created a 24-hour call center, a website specifically for them to register. And immediately, personally, myself as well, we assisted everybody. People who want to go to a new hotel, people who want to move districts, because we had a curfew. The curfew passes were considered as their ticket so that they could go to the airport. We provided transport. A lot of work was done together with the embassies. So that was our first action plan. And thereafter, still have something, because some of them are at Ayurveda, our local indigenous medicine places, and they feel more comfortable to stay on. So some of them are still continue to stay on. And that's what we did before. Then thereafter, what happened was after handling our guests in our country, that we immediately looked at how do we help the industry. So what we did was looked at a wage support scheme for 6 months at a lower interest rate. For people who are working in the tourism industry, which is about 440,000 people, as you mentioned. That is the direct employment. Indirect employment is about 2 million or more. So that's about 10% of the Sri Lankan population. So quite a lot of people are affected by this. So we were quite innovative in the sense that we immediately started giving hotels as quarantine centers. So Sri Lankans who are returning were given an option. Yes, the government will pay for a PCR test. Government will give you free quarantine, which is 14 days, strict quarantine. And that you will be in a room basically for 14 days. Okay, there's a TV and whatever, but basically you're in the room. Food is provided to you free of charge. PCR tests are done. But if you want, you can pay for and stay in a better location. So the army took the hotels who wanted to offer the hotels, and still the army and the air force, the forces, the medical profession managed them.
Wow.
And so lots of hotels opted for that because 14 days full hotel very minimal services. I mean, there's no pool being used, no restaurants, nothing, just a room. So they all opted to take this, and there's a bit of a scramble. Everybody wanted to take it because it's not a lot of money, but it covers their staff costs and their basic overheads. Then we looked at, then we implemented actually seafarers. So globally, there were loads of seafarers who couldn't dock anywhere, and nobody was willing to take them. So what we did was we identified hotels who were willing to give their hotels, and we allowed seafarers to come and stay in Sri Lanka. So several ships were sent to our country, and we accommodated seafarers. So that way we helped the tourism industry.
Right.
So that's how. And the local domestic tourism, then as I said, in 30th of April, everything was back to normal for us. So we started opening schools, the shops, went to work, public, everything was open. And we opened the hotels for domestic tourism in May. So we started off with very strict guidelines. We actually created a 80-page guideline. We studied some of the other countries, like Singapore and some of the other countries, what their guidelines were. I've been told that our guidelines are stricter than all of them. It is very strict because the government takes this very, very, very seriously. And the people tend to listen to and go along with what we are suggesting from the COVID task force, which makes our life a little bit easier. So we agreed to open up for banquets because as Sri Lankans, we enjoy big weddings in Sri Lanka and a lot of celebrations, 500, 600, 700,000 people weddings. So they were upset when we first said 100 people in a wedding. But with 1.5 meter distance, we allowed banquets first. And the guidelines were very strict, how to do the banquets, the spa treatment, how to room service, housekeeping, and you do random PCR tests for the staff. So it's quite a strict guideline, which actually is audited. We outsourced it, and auditing is done by KPMG. I believe in Singapore also it's done by KPMG. So we gave it over to KPMG. They do a very detailed auditing. Some hotels, of course, fail. It's done free of charge. But if they fail, they have to pay for it the next time round. So that is now implemented, and now the certification process is going on. That certification process is not for domestic tourism because domestic tourism, all hotels are open now. We're actually full during weekends. The hotels are full, but the certification process is only for when we open the airport. Where can an international guest book? So for that, it's quite difficult. So that process now is going on.
Okay, thank you. That was really comprehensive and lots of lessons in there for some of the other countries to pick. I think there were some unique models that you've mentioned and that applications, which I'm hearing and learning for the first time, that how you filled the gap with the seafarers and, how the government was distributing food. I think those are some of those measures which have helped out and served you well. So accompanying with the impacts of the pandemic, Sri Lanka's tourism industry was only just recovering from the effects of last year's Easter Sunday bombings that killed 279 people, including 45 foreigners. When the virus halted international travel to the island and forced hotels to shut down, but okay, we'll not go there because you've said somehow recovered from that. But recovery of Sri Lankan tourism from those attacks it seems had confidently come back at the end of the year of 2019, bearing only 5 to 6 months of impact. Do you think the lessons of resilience learned then helped to cope with the COVID setback? And if so, what were these?
Actually, we've gone through a tsunami before.
Right.
And it impacted tourism, right? So right. 30 years we've had a war. And that was over 2009. Before that also we had the tsunami. Then we had the Easter Sunday. So Sri Lankans, we are quite resilient. And we tend to bounce back. And maybe because we are an island, I suppose, I don't know, that we tend to pick up and we move on. Now the COVID situation, for example, we had like daily, twice a day communication with our people, our population, our citizens, our brothers and sisters. We communicated non-stop. We told them what is happening. We told them what was happening in other countries. We told them why it's so important for them to listen to our advice. And that if we get to do this together, we can do it. And nobody in Sri Lanka will starve from it. And even like we had like not in some like in countries, some countries in Asia have like lots of beggars, but we had few. But even them, we took care of them. We even bathed them. We gave them their masks. We gave them their food, and we told them even you are important. So it was, I don't know, maybe it's the culture or I don't know what it is, but everyone got on with it. Got on. This is another challenge we have to handle. We trust the government to tell us what is right. So we will abide by that. But also the government, what we did was right at the beginning, when it happened in, the pandemic happened in China. And in a sense, all of us, a lot of the countries didn't really, we thought it's an issue in China, right? So a lot of us didn't take that much seriously, but our government immediately sent, we were the first flight to China to bring back our students. So immediately the airline, the Sri Lankan Airlines was sent and brought back our students from China. So I think that also created a sense of government wants to look after everybody, everyone outside as well. So we need to listen, this is serious. So I think that helped us a lot. And also dengue, things like dengue, I think we are quite, our health system actually is really, really good. And what happens is, I think the health system really played quite a big role. And we have like, as I said, the structure, then we have like, we call PHIs, and we have a huge structure involved, and it's free. Right. So people tend to go for help then.
Now, I'm picking up, was communication. I think that's been the key, because now I talk to governments all the time, all around the world, and I can pick that very easily, that there are some countries which are really lagging behind in that, and I think people just want to be communicated and to be told. And some countries are a little bit more obedient than the others. They pay attention to the governments more. I won't take the name of some countries, some of my neighborhood, it's a real issue. We Canadians are very obedient as well. We listen to our government. Yeah, it's important. Yes. Okay, so as of now, thousands of tourism services and establishments that range from blue chip companies to souvenir sellers on the beach have entered into an unprecedented period of if not zero revenue, but there's a drop in revenues, leaving the stakeholders of the industry in a dilemma on the next steps to be taken, specifically on the finances. How is the government helping and supporting through any financial waivers, funding? Talk to us about it.
Absolutely. We've given a moratorium for 6 months for them not to pay the loans. We've also about to implement a wage support scheme for 6 months' salary. The utility bills, that's the water and electricity, we are giving additional time to pay. The guides, the tour guides and individuals actually involved who are trained with us and registered with us already got a one-off grant for them, as well as the tourist drivers who have registered with us and trained with us. We already gave them a grant. So there's always an issue with banks implementing what governments have decided at cabinet. So there's always a challenge, and there's a little bit of a push and pull. But so basically the government sees tourism as critical. Government knows the value of it, fully committed. And from our perspective, actually, I mean, we never really went to mass scale tourism. Some other countries in the region in Asia went to 38 million tourists or 20 million tourists or whatever. Height of our tourism in 2018, we only went for 2.3 million. So as an island, we are not wanting to go for the mass scale tourism. So that's why if you notice that we rebounded back to 1.9 million soon after the bomb, because there is a pent-up demand also for the country, and there are people who keep visiting, who also invested. So there's a lot of connection involved. So Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So your top 10 source markets, most of them have been seriously hit by the COVID-19 in terms of spread of the virus and the mortality rate. Although China has been very successful in pandemic control, it is unlikely that China allowing their citizens to engage with any sort of leisure trips outside their borders in near future. Maldives has recorded a minimum number of infected cases among the top 10 source markets to Sri Lanka. Their economic value is relatively lower than many Maldivians are visiting Sri Lanka for education, business, and health purposes with tourist visa. It is further important to note that currently there are no bookings for the 2020 winter season. Is that true? And the tour operators are canceling the bookings made in advance, the hotels, travel agencies, and compliant. Therefore, it is very much palpable that Sri Lankan tourism source markets are at stake and will not be sending tourists to Sri Lanka during the course of the year. What's the strategy to fill the gap? I know you've said domestic tourism, but is that enough? Or is there a plan or a strategy to target new markets instead?
Yeah, actually, domestic tourism is not enough for us because our
Right.
country has only 22 million people. So that will account for 10-15%.
Right.
So that's not. If you have a hotel here and you are doing lots of banquets, maybe a little bit, but it's not significant. You know, it's a strange thing because even though the airport is not open, we are getting requests after requests for tourists to come over. And the reason why things are cancelling because we as a government is not saying when the airport is open. Whether it is from Poland, is it from Russia, it is from Europe, it is from, I know India is, it has its challenges, but even India and some other countries, people wanted to come to Sri Lanka. So it is actually the issue is not, is anyone going to come to our country? It's a question is they will, because I'm getting so many emails and requests. Even airlines who are not operating in our country now wanting to operate going forward. So we would not have an issue with airlines who are continuously in touch with me wanting to fly the moment we say so. They're very, very keen. So I don't see a huge problem because Sri Lanka is seen as a country that's managed COVID really well. From some of the tourists who are just not going back at all. The numbers, and so I don't think it's a huge issue for us in that sense. Our issue is more little bit different in the sense that Sri Lankans are not wanting the airport open because they are scared that tourists will bring COVID. So the challenge I'm having, and we have done even a cabinet paper on this matter, and we are actually going to launch a PR campaign to convince Sri Lankans two things. One is that it's okay to work in the tourism industry. You do not have to be scared. We are taking all precautions. So a lot of employees in the tourism sector in Sri Lanka, unfortunately, not very women. 95-96% are men. So most wives, children, mothers, fathers telling them don't join the tourism industry again. So that is a challenge for us. Okay. So we are launching a media campaign on that. And number two is to say, whilst joining our industry, to say that tourists who are coming to Sri Lanka are safe. And why do we say that to you as Sri Lankans? It is not that we won't have tourists. The challenge is to convince our own citizens to open our country, because a lot of them say, no, we are all safe now. The rest of the world is having these issues. Our government did such a good job. Let's not open the airport. So what we have actually done is, with the help of UNDP and our IT, we created actually an app which will be actually really useful going forward for in fact data gathering for future tourists, how to promote as well, and provide a service to tourists going forward, because today in the past when they travel Sri Lanka, they didn't have anything like that. So basically that app would be incorporated into the immigration visa application process. Say for example, you're coming from Canada to Sri Lanka, and say your husband is Sri Lankan and you're applying for a visa, right? And then when you apply for the visa, you will apply through our normal visa application process. During the visa application process, this app will be there, which you have to go through to move on. So you will be indicating clearly which certified hotel, like I explained before, that you will be staying, what district you'll be staying, what hotel, and number, dates. We will ask you the question, are you traveling with a Sri Lankan passport holder? And you would say yes. So the Sri Lankan passport holder then will be tracked as a tourist, if you like. We will inform you about the COVID test before, 72 hours before, on arrival, and all that. We will inform you. We'll inform you about the insurance. So we will inform you, and then the district officers will be informed that you will be arriving to their district to do a PCR test on the 5th to the 7th day. So we are trying to convince our citizens actually first to open the airport. I don't see a big challenge because there are companies that are calling us saying, could we bring a charter from Europe? Could we bring a charter from Russia? Could we bring a charter from Poland, from Ukraine, from all these countries? And lots of Sri Lankans who are kind of tourists, if you like, wanting to come back from so many countries. So we don't, and in fact, initially we are thinking of opening the airport for smaller, like maybe 100 tourists a day, one flight a day, or 200, because we don't want, lots of flights coming in. So I don't see a big challenge in bringing in tourists, actually.
That's a perfect position to be in. So going forward, what other products do you think there's an opportunity to create, because there's adventure tourism circuit with Sri Lanka, where travelers get to experience the landscapes, followed by trips down to south, explore some of Sri Lanka's best surfing spots. Similarly, a spiritual tourism circuit could offer the international traveler a well-marketed package to discover the historical monuments of faith systems. Okay, then there's medical tourism can be promoted. Do you think that, it is a new strategic tourism product development time, whilst people are coping with COVID?
Absolutely. Sri Lanka really never promoted wellness, our Ayurveda. We've never actually, some of us survived the COVID using our own indigenous medicines. So most of us, that's how we survive and gone through sitting next to people who are infected. So wellness is big, and EU has told us that they will support us with that initiative, with the promotion side of it. We are on Helaveda Kama, Ayurveda, and the complete wellness, the gamut. With regards to adventure, because Sri Lanka has historically, it's been sun and sea and whatever, but it's the tourists, our international guests, who actually in a way came over and did the adventure. Now, for example, certain areas we have in Arugambe and all these areas, Mirissa, it's all like water sports, big time. So this is something that we will let the world know. Adventure tourism is another huge area for us. Sports tourism, whether it's the cycling and all that, we've actually identified 4,956 new locations where tourists have not gone. And we are putting it in, including it into the app as well. So if you want to go camping, if you go to cycling, as you said, Buddhist tourism, the cultural side. So we are using this, and in a strange way, COVID and the timing of, I came in 1st of January, but this all happened in February. But I think, this was COVID was forced on us, but this is a super opportunity, this downtime that we are using to identify these locations which we've never really done before, because every time the hotels are full, right? So no one really bothered. And and also to look at a kind of a client. Everyone says high-end. Yes, high-end, but also a type of a client who would appreciate our island. The island that you can see an elephant, you can see a leopard, and you can see a whale all within an hour.
Right.
An island that you can have the beach, and you can have cruises right around the island in yachts and do all the water sports, right? In an island where you can...
Yeah, so it's time to rethink the products.
Absolutely. We are an island, I think, that is perfectly suited. I think Sri Lanka is like a summary or everything that Asia has to offer in one island. Everything what Asia has to offer in one island. Because if I don't want to mention names, but if you look at each country and look at what the strengths are, it's the food and everything. So yeah, I think this is a great opportunity, and I'm quite excited actually about the opportunity that's forced upon us.
your enthusiasm is infectious. I just want to fly now to your country. I want to be there now. By the way, I love your country. I've been there many times. Okay. Just moving on, the chairman of Sri Lankan Airlines is very confident about the possibility to reopen tourism soon. He states they have been working around the clock to adapt their operations to meet the country's health and safety guidelines and challenging requirements of the new normal. Warning, you should take 3 different COVID tests in order to be granted access to Sri Lanka. Is that not a deterrent, or it's smart management?
It's a good question. We manage
the COVID, right? I mean, people are so stressed right now, and the very notion of getting on an aircraft is stressful. So then on top of that, 3 tests, so how does that even work?
The PCR test before, lots of the airlines flying in Asia at least are demanding a PCR test anyway for the airlines. So 72 hours before, most airlines flying to Sri Lanka are requesting that. So it's anyway there. With regards to the one that is when you arrive, as you know, the way the infection works is that you need at least 8th, 9th, 10th day is only when you will catch it. And I can say that quite categorically because I've been in the COVID task force. So even if you've done 72 hours before, you might be still negative, right? You need to catch this on the 8th, 9th, 10th day. So that's why we will do the PCR test on arrival, but we are looking at more modern technology, which will be able to do. I mean, there are also some countries have got in Europe, this actually Denmark and various countries. So we are looking at those tests because you can do 32 guests, patients or guests in one go. It's with a robotic arm and whatever, so it's quite fast. So the frustration often is that it takes 18-24 hours, but that you cannot have for a guest who comes on a long flight or a short flight. He or she's not going to be doing that. So we are going to have a separate area for the guests, which is very comfortable, where you can have your tea and coffee and eat something and everything, and maybe 3 hours, maximum 4, but the actually taking the test, the whole process will be 2, but just to be safe, I would say 3 to 4 hours. So 3 to 4 hours, and then you're off. Then you're off to your hotel, where the hotelier, whoever it is, will be responsible for your travel. You can book through a OTA or directly with the hotel, or you can book through a travel agent or tour operator. It doesn't matter to us, as long as your transport is arranged. Your transport will turn up. We will disinfect it for you, free of charge. You will get in and you will go to your hotel.
Okay.
When you go to your hotel for 14 days, whichever hotel you booked, most of the people, I have to tell you, who are writing to me from Europe, particularly, are saying, we don't want to travel anywhere. We found this villa that we always used to come. We just want to be in front of the tea plantations, or we want to be on a beach for 14 days. We won't travel anywhere. So most of them say that. And in the 5th to the 7th day, while we are doing it, when we do that, I can tell you, we can assure you as the guest that you're clean of COVID. And when you're going back, if your airline asks you to do it, you came to my country free of COVID, and you're going away from my country free of COVID. And it will be in your interest that you are safe. We want to make you safe, and we want to give you that assurance that you're safe, because we are all safe. We don't have COVID. So we want to make sure that you are safe too. And after the 14th day, you will be able to travel wherever you want. And then even that, to be extra careful, very popular sites like Sigiriya, Yala, we would have separate times for international guests. So you will not intermingle with the domestic tourism, right? And a hotel that is taking international tourists will not be able to take domestic tourists. So it will be completely international tourists. Okay. So we want to make sure that you come healthy and you leave healthy, Okay. So I hope that would be understood.
Okay. That's very, very clear. Thank you for taking the time to explain that, because it's the peace of mind for people, right? That's the whole idea. And perhaps you're right. This is the new normal, that we are living in. Better to be safe than sorry. And I don't blame Sri Lanka or the Sri Lankan government at all for taking these measures, because with the kind of numbers that you have currently for COVID are the envy of many, many other countries, and that must be protected under all circumstances, So I think striking that fine balance is a challenge, but you guys are doing a great job. Just moving on. Hotels will undergo significant changes. There is a level of suffering from financial losses due to the international travel restrictions. Besides, there were 382 hotel projects have been approved, but many of them may have no light. Additionally, Sri Lanka's tourism depends on much natural beauty, must help nature and protects its healing process. Who will survive? Who will crash? What are the commercial strategies you envision for the hospitality that will be successful? Is Sri Lanka open to future investments?
Absolutely. You'll be surprised. We still have international investments. Right now, there is a 415 million US dollar investment for one hotel. There is another investment down south in Yala. There are several international hotels still wanting to come to Sri Lanka, and our investment, it continues. And what we have done from the investment perspective is previously, when you want to invest in a hotel, you had to go to 34 line agencies to get various approvals. It used to actually take years. And now what we have done is we put all of them together to a master application. So when you get the application from Sri Lanka Tourism, that's the only application you need to sign. That application has everything, whether it is for environmental authority or wildlife or anybody, it's all included. So we are making that process much easier. Number two, we've made a land bank. It's about 60, 65%, 70% done now, where we would put all the lands on our website that any investor overseas anywhere can have a look at it and apply for to invest in the land. We don't see a dearth of investments actually. What is really though important, which I'm focusing on, and it's not always easy to implement, is the sustainability side of that. So we want to implement sustainable destination. Conservancy, where we have, say for example, Yala or Sigiri as a sustainable destination, zero plastic, renewable energy, so all that. So we are actually working with the other line agencies to implement that. I think going forward, that's what we need to focus on. It doesn't have to be marble floors or whatever. People are looking like all this time tree houses, for example, were never opened, never approved really in Sri Lanka tourism. It still happened, but it was, in a sense, informal sector. But now we approve tree houses because people are looking for that, camping sites. People want to be back to nature. And that's something you focus on.
Yeah, okay. That is good. So sustainability is still top priority along with the investments. Okay, that's good to know. So we've discussed about that every crisis creates opportunities, and I think you've talked about that you are rethinking the product. But tell me a little bit about security and technology. How are you, what opportunities has COVID presented you that you will, moving forward, do things differently?
Absolutely. Security is critical, whether it is for COVID or for any other crime or thing. So what we have done is, even in the app, in the next version, I call it version 0, which is very simple, but the version 1, the World Bank and ADB is assisting us in this. So basically there will be an emergency button. If you have an issue, it will automatically be connected to the closest police station. The president has already appointed a separate DIG for police for tourism. Okay. Specifically, never in the history of Sri Lanka have we had that. Wow. They will have a separate, like an identification that they are for the tourist police. We are getting more women involved in the female police officers because often sexual issues or whatever. Compared to some of the other countries, we don't have a huge issue. But whatever, if there's one issue against the tourists, it's a big issue for us.
Right.
Zero tolerance on this. Zero tolerance on this, and it's scaling up. We're going to have so many more branches and to have tourist police, particularly on the beaches, right, where we have the most amount of issues.
Okay, and technology, obviously, the apps and all of that, and
Yes.
going digital is key, right? At this moment, and I think this is one of the things that we have all learned is to go digital during COVID, because the fact that you and I are talking right now, I'm in Canada, you're in Sri Lanka through this platform, is a huge plus point that we are all learning to somehow cope with things, although I would prefer to meet you in person. Okay. So, in closing, the stunning landscapes, fascinating heritage, and the warmth of their population have made the small country island of Sri Lanka a must see for travelers worldwide. Today, when many countries are focusing their efforts on reactivating their economies, the time has come when we will be able to bathe in the beautiful Sri Lanka beaches again safely. It is clear the authorities are taking no chances and taking this pandemic head on and ensuring the safety for all of its visitors. I cannot wait to visit my favorite paradise once again. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, and I bow one to all of you. Good health.
Thank you, and I look forward to